Baha'u'llah, the prophet and founder of the Baha'i Faith, wrote, "The essence of wealth is love for me. Whoso loveth me is the possessor of all things, and he that loveth me not is indeed of the poor and needy. That is that which the finger of glory and splendor hath revealed. O children of dust, tell the rich of the midnight, sighing of the poor, let us lead them into the path of destruction, and deprive them of the tree of wealth. To give and to be generous are attributes of mine. Well is it with him that adorneth himself with my virtues."
Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah and his designated successor, wrote, "Wealth is praiseworthy in the highest degree, if it is acquired by an individual's own efforts and the grace of God, in commerce, agriculture, art, and industry, and if it be expended for philanthropic purposes. Above all, if a judicious and resourceful individual should initiate measures which would universally enrich the masses of the people, there could be no undertaking greater than this, and it would rank in the sight of God as the supreme achievement. For such a benefactor would supply the needs and ensure the comfort and well-being of a great multitude. Wealth is most commendable, provided the entire population is wealthy."
Thank you so much. So now I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. Just a reminder to please save all your questions until after the talk. This week, we're so excited to have Mr. Steve Sarowitz with us, and his topic is Material Wealth and Spirituality, a Baha'i Perspective. Steve Sarowitz is founder and chairman of Paylocity, a leading US provider of payroll and HR solutions. In addition, Steve also serves as CEO of Blue Marble, an international payroll provider, and as director of Payscape, a UK payroll provider. He is also an international philanthropist with an interest in promoting unity and universal education, and advocating for the elimination of racism, sexism, nationalism, and religious prejudice. He also serves on the board of NCAT, an organization that builds state-of-the-art training centers in urban areas. In his second career as filmmaker, Steve is now a partner in Wayfarer Studios, and executive producer of the Disney movie Clouds. Steve served as executive producer for the award-winning documentary Maya Angelou and I Still Rise. Steve also produced a groundbreaking documentary called The Gate, Dawn of the Baha'i Faith, about the Bab, the prophet herald of the Baha'i Faith. Steve is an avid runner who has been inducted into the Chicago Area Runners Association Hall of Fame and is a 3-time winner of the MSC division in the Chicago Chase Corporate Challenge. Steve is married with 2 children and holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Illinois. And with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Sarowitz.
Thank you very much. So let me start off by talking about how I came to be a Baha'i, since we're talking about the Baha'i faith. I was raised Jewish. I'm 55 as of last week, and I really was intending on staying Jewish my whole life. When I was in college, I heard about this faith. Somebody at the Jewish Center mentioned the Baha'i faith, and what was interesting to me was that the Jews, I was always taught the Jews were right and everyone else was wrong. And that didn't make sense, that the Jews were right and the Christians were wrong, or the Christians were right and the Jews were wrong. That was just confusing to me. I thought, well, why couldn't everyone be right? And that's what this Baha'i gentleman was saying to me, essentially, that there's one God and all the messengers come from that same God. And the message is essentially the same, which is to love God and love thy neighbor. And it's just different in the age, and in every age there's different needs. And that made perfect sense to me. And so being very determined to follow it, I took only 29 years more to become a Baha'i from that point on. I didn't do much with it for a while. I always said I like what the Baha'is say, but I didn't even realize I could become a Baha'i. And it wasn't until my mid-40s I really became, I started studying the Baha'i faith. And then one day I went home in 2013 and I said to my wife, I'm a Baha'i now. And I jumped up and down as high as a 47-year-old man can jump. And my wife said, no, you're not. You have to wait until the kids are bar mitzvah. It's 2.5 more years. So I was sitting there waiting for my kids to be bar mitzvah, and my company, Paylocity, went public in 2014, and I became very wealthy. I'd been wealthy and became much more wealthy all of a sudden. And I just started, my wife and I were very determined to do philanthropy. So I called up a gentleman by the name of Bill Strickland. He does centers. You mentioned NCAT in my introduction. I told him I wanted to build a center in Chicago. I didn't know what to do, but 22 people had been shot the weekend before and 22 people shot the previous weekend. And I wanted to do something to help, and I didn't know what to do, but I'd heard Bill talk and I was very impressed. And I said, Bill, maybe you can help me. And so he agreed to help me, and we started building the center called ShyCat, which we built. And about 5 or 6 conversations into it, Bill says to me, I'm talking to these Jewish philanthropists about building a center in Akko, Israel. And I about fell out of my chair. For those of you who are Baha'is, Akko is, you know, I don't have to tell you why Akko is so important, but for those of you who aren't, Akko is the spiritual center of the Baha'i faith. It's where Baha'u'llah is buried. And I, of course, jumped at the chance to go to Akko. Even though I was raised Jewish, I'd never been to Israel. So I went to Israel in 2014, and on September 12th, I even remember the day, 2014, I walked into the garden surrounding the shrine of Baha'u'llah, one person. I walked out completely different person. I always like to say that I had intellectually accepted Baha'u'llah as the messenger for this age in 2013. But on that day, on September 12th, 2014, he entered my heart. And I had a complete spiritual transformation to the extent that my wife literally thought I'd gone crazy. We looked it up and she said, there's 2 possibilities. Either you've gone crazy or you've had a spiritual transformation. I said, well, since I did have a spiritual transformation, maybe we'll choose that one. And I went from being an entrepreneur who loved the Baha'i faith to being a Baha'i who couldn't care less about business. And I was teaching the Baha'i faith literally nonstop. I'd wake up in the morning, start talking about the Baha'i faith, and I'd go to sleep talking about the Baha'i faith. And I did this for a couple of years. My wife asked me after a couple of years, when was the last time you read anything that's not a Baha'i book? And I hadn't remembered. I said, I guess 2 years ago. I also stopped sleeping for a while. I was sleeping about 4 hours a night. I was happy as a lark. I can see why my wife thought I'd gone crazy. But I was just happy, and I'd really gotten a big dose of the love that Baha'u'llah brought to humanity. I just, for some reason, was a good receptor of it, and started spreading it, and started spreading his message that we're one human family. And that's really the primary message behind the Baha'i faith. You know, there's a lot of different ways to talk about it. And one of the things I'd say about religion, it shouldn't be about how you identify. I just had this conversation with a Christian friend of mine this morning, and I said, you love Jesus, I love Jesus. There's no fight. I love Baha'u'llah. I said, just don't ask me to give up Baha'u'llah and I'm okay. And I won't ask you to give up Jesus. In fact, I share your love for Jesus. And I think the whole idea that we have to fight in the name of religion goes against every religion. So I, as I said, became a passionate Baha'i. At the same time, I became very wealthy. So I went from, you know, I was raised middle class. Today, I'm one of the, if you took the Forbes 400 today, I would be on it. I'm worth a few $1 billion or somewhere around there. And that's a lot of money. To me, it's not important. And so one of the things you said with the readings up front is that really true wealth is spiritual wealth. And I wanted to really start off talking about that. One of my favorite hidden words is this. Hidden words were revealed by Baha'u'llah in Baghdad in the 1850s. And here's what he says. O ye that pride yourselves on mortal riches, know ye in truth that wealth is a mighty barrier between the seeker and his desire, the lover and his beloved. The rich, but for a few, shall in no wise attain the court of his presence, nor enter the city of content and resignation. Well is it then with him who being rich is not hindered by his riches from the eternal kingdom, nor deprived by them of imperishable dominion. By the most great name, the splendor of such a wealthy man shall illuminate the dwellers of heaven, even as the sun enlightens the people of the earth. My attitude towards wealth is this, that it's not ours, it's God's. It's all God's. And those of us who are wealthy are here to serve God, just like those of us who are poor, and we're all one human family. And one of the things the writings is very clear about is that, you know, really there shouldn't be people as wealthy as me. This is me as a billionaire saying this. My wife and I are determined to give away the great majority of our wealth, and that's what we will do. And we do give away a lot of our money, and we're continuing to give more. Don't contact me and ask for anything, because I'm going to say no, because we don't really do anything unsolicited. But what we do is we think very carefully, and really the way I look at wealth is it's just in service to humanity. That's all. I'm not a fancy guy. I drive a Prius. I have one house, that's it. I'm just not fancy. I don't, this is my normal attire. Is I have a t-shirt that says, "So powerful is the light of unity that it can illumine the whole earth. And so that's pretty much me. I don't think if someone thinks I'm less than important or less than perfect because I don't dress that well or I drive a Prius, that's okay with me. And that would be okay if I was poor too. What I want to do is serve. And what I want to do is use this money to practically, and this is something I want to say for anyone who has been blessed like me with wealth, or if you know someone who's blessed with wealth, practically use that wealth to serve God, to serve Baha'u'llah, to serve humanity. And so what I've been learning over the last 5 years is that I can integrate my faith with business. I've gone back to doing business now. I'm somewhat active in my movie company, and I should say our movie company because I'm partners with Justin. I'll say, I don't want to say Justin Baldoni, the wonderful Justin Baldoni, the director of Clouds and also one of the stars in Jane the Virgin. He's a wonderful Baha'i and absolutely fabulous business partner. And together we want to make movies and TV shows that uplift people of color, that uplift women, that uplift really everybody that hasn't had a fair shake. You see, to me, I'm very passionate that all of us are God's children, every one of us. And if one of us is suffering, then all of us are suffering. And so my money is just a way for me to change that. So what I've been doing, if you look at what I do on a daily basis, in the last year, what's interesting, for the last 5 years, I've been doing anti-racism things. And I had no idea I was preparing for this time because I had no idea this year was going to happen. And all of a sudden, racism was in the news all the time. I was doing the work, and I feel I feel very well prepared for what's happening now. And it's like I'd been rehearsing, and then I was in the minor leagues, and now all of a sudden I was taken up to the big leagues. And people are asking me, well, what do you do? And so a couple things, I'll just say, if you happen to be like me, you're white, what does that mean when it comes to racism? And the Baha'i writings are absolutely fabulous. For those of you who haven't read the Universal House of Justice letter to the American Baha'is in July, that letter was golden to me. We cannot fight racism with contention and strife, conflict and contention. We can't look at anybody as the other. We have to do this with love. But first of all, we have to admit that we have had racism for hundreds of years. We have to admit it is a problem. That's number one. It's like the first step of overcoming alcoholism. We have a problem. And it's a deep problem in America. And it's not like you can snap your fingers and make it go away. It's not like you can say, well, I remember this is someone who's a newer Baha'i. A couple of years ago, we were at a Baha'i conference, and they said, well, it's all okay now. Black people can vote, and they can do all these things, and they have all the rights that white people do. And I said, yes, that's true. That's true. Black people do have those rights. But we've been stepping on the necks. And, my family's relatively new to this country. But pardon me, I'm going to have a drink of water, just an itch in my throat. We've been stepping on the necks of Black people for over 400 years. And you cannot say that everything is equal when white people have, I think it's 100 times, is it 10 or 100 times? I think it's 100 times the average wealth. The average white person in America, I think, is 100 times wealth. I mean, it's crazy if you look at those figures. We know as Baha'is and as human beings, if we have any sense whatsoever, that we're all born equal, that we're all children of God. And if you tell me that one person is 100 times better because of the color of their skin, that's absolutely ridiculous. So, and we also know that Black people are 2.5 times more likely to be shot by police. We know that Black people are 5 times more likely to be in jail. These are not things that have anything to do with the color of their skin from a genetic point of view. It is injustice. And so what I say is, wherever there's injustice, fight it. There's a huge problem on college campuses right now against Jews. Coming from a Jewish background, my mom asked me to fight this. I'm fighting that injustice. So everywhere I see injustice, and see, I don't see that as being something that's not helping the poor, because guess what? Injustice is what makes people poor. Inequity, it makes all of us poor. The letter from the Universal House of Justice said racism was a blight on all of humanity. So I've been doing anti-racism things. I'm doing with a fellow Baha'i, Hugh Semple. I'm doing, we serve on the LSA in our local community, so we've been doing talks every other month. We had the absolutely amazing Joy DeGroot to kick it off. We had Jamie Heath last time, also another wonderful Baha'i, basically having conversations about what it means to be Black in America and what we can do. So what do we do as a white American? Number one, admit that racism exists. Number two, do everything you can to right the wrongs. So me, that's a lot of weight on my shoulders because I can do a lot. And so in all of my companies, I'm saying, okay, who can I hire at a high level who's Black? And I'm not just saying hire someone who's Black, I'm saying hire the best person I can for the job, but look first at people of color, if I can all possible. And so we're doing that in my companies and bring that on boards. Fund Black-owned businesses. My wife and I put together a fund, $20 million to fund Black-owned businesses. Invest in companies that treat Black people well. And there's actually an NAACP impact fund. Look it up, the NAACP impact fund. Even if you don't have a lot of money like me, you can invest in this. Put your money where your mouth is, because money matters. And listen. We have 2 ears. Listen to your Black friends. And if you don't have any Black friends, get some. They'll be happy to talk to you. Listen to people. You know, racism is the biggest problem in America. I'm going to talk about it a lot. I've lost about 20, 30 friends on Facebook. I'm surprised I didn't lose more. Robert Smith just said the Montgomery Travelers, yes, is a great group of people in the north suburbs of Chicago. Absolutely, and I'm friends with many of them. So they went down to Montgomery. A lot of them are not Baha'is, and we love them all, of course. What's interesting is I don't look at people really as Baha'is or not Baha'is. I look at them as spirits. I've got my friend Trevor. I'll call you out. You're my Christian friend who's Baha'i in spirit. You know what I mean when I say that. So what I believe is we're all in this ride together. Whatever religion we call ourselves, whatever color we are, whether we're a man, whether a woman. My job as a philanthropist is to even the playing field for those who have had less in some way. Remove those blocks. So I fight for women's rights. We're big supporters of YWCA. I'm good friends with Dory McWhorter, who runs the YWCA in Chicago. I'm working with Bill Strickland, who does a lot in urban areas, but I'm doing a lot of different, we support a lot of different charities. We have a nonprofit we just found called Embrace Race, actually run by a non-Baha'i, and I'm doing this actually with my Baha'i. I have a Baha'i arm of my philanthropic giving, and this is a man, African-American, who educates people on race. And we called him up and said, look, we want to give you money. We're Baha'is. And he, I think he probably is looking up what a Baha'i is now. But we're thrilled. I just actually talked to him for the first time last week. We've been giving to him, and I hadn't actually talked to him myself. But we knew we liked what he did. And the whole idea, again, going to this point, we're all in it together. Doesn't matter what religion you label yourself. Are we not human beings? And are we not on this world together? And do we not breathe the same air? And do we not look upon the same sun? And if we understand that, then our everything about our life, our philanthropy, our work, our play should be about that, about making this one human family. Our poverty, our sickness, our war, everything that makes us miserable is because of the failure to realize that. If 2020 hasn't taught us anything, it has to have taught us that we're one human family. And that our failure to recognize that we're one human family is causing these great troubles, these travails for humanity. I tell people all the time, COVID is because of our failure to recognize that we're one human family. Why? Because China hides it. Why? Because they don't want, again, it's a competitive thing. You want to hide it. And that's natural if you think of it one country versus another. But we live on the same globe, and what happens in one country happens, and now it's gone all over the globe. Plus, we don't fight it universally. We think that country does it this way, this country does it that way. If we were united, we would have wiped out COVID a long time ago. We need to think in every problem. And we have many global problems that need to be fought globally. And I'm not the only one saying it. Of course, Baha'is are very global in their outlook, but other people like the former Prime Minister of the UK, Mr. Gordon, he came out and said that we need global governance. It's obvious now, things like climate change. We need to start thinking about, we need to have, as Baha'u'llah says, a world-embracing view. So as a Baha'i philanthropist, I have a world-embracing view. I don't think it's, I want to help America. I'm not a nationalist. I'm a globalist. Now, does that mean I don't love America? No, of course I love America. I've been born and raised in America. It's been wonderful to me. I'm happy to live in the United States of America. But I love every country. I love every country. I see someone from Ireland here. I love Ireland. I love the UK. I love Germany. I love Israel. I love Ethiopia. We are all living on this globe. And so part of what I think of as a philanthropist is, how can I help all the people of the world? And what's my biggest bang for the buck? I actually have a lot of respect for Bill Gates. I know he is the pariah to a lot of people now. A lot of people say terrible things about him. I always defend him and say, no, I think he's a kind man. I think he's an imperfect human being like all of us, but I think he and Melinda are trying to make the world a better place. And one of the things I particularly like about the Gates Foundation is their focus on doing the biggest bang for the buck for humanity. And I really think that's important, that we look at this as one world. And so what can I do that can make the biggest difference for the most number of people? Not the most number of rich people, the most number of Americans, but people. We do a lot of work in Honduras. My wife is from Honduras. So unfortunately, Honduras has had a lot of problems. We do a lot of work actually throughout the world. So my view is not just, I want to help people in my backyard. But I do also focus a lot, having said that, in Chicago, because that's where I'm from. And if you look at the way the Baha'i Faith says to do it, it's a very interesting thing. It's hyper-local, and yet it's also global at the same time. So the way the Baha'i Faith is with everything, it's balance. You have the law and you have love. If you have only love, you get chaos. If you have only law, you get tyranny. You need it in the middle. And so philanthropy is the same way. And so I wrote to the House of Justice about philanthropy, and that's pretty much what they told me. They said it needs to be balanced. You need to have your say. The local community has to have their say, and so on and so forth. And the administrative order, which is the Baha'i administrative order, they have to have their say. And so I understand that basically I don't just go into a community and say, here you are, here's what you're going to have, you're going to like it. Never should we do that. On the other hand, it's very good to be coordinated globally. So it's a balance. And so everything in moderation, I believe Buddha might have said that. Same thing with philanthropy. What you want to do is you want to go, and this is something that I've started doing much more so now, is support community efforts. And so what I really love about Baha'i philanthropy, and I'm working with the Baha'i International Development Organization, is that Baha'i philanthropy is focused on the community. Instead of us going to the community and saying, here's what you want, and here's the money to pay for it, it's, what do you want? How can we help you? What are you doing? And letting this support come from the community, let the ideas come from the community, and the money can come from me. And so I've done that in several different instances. And I can tell you that's much more successful, and it's much more sustainable because the ideas and the energy, and you also learn a lot. Again, you learn more by listening. So for me, to really sum it up, this is really my practical, if you look at philanthropy, it's the practical application of my Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith is about the oneness of humanity. From a Baha'i perspective, there's only one faith of God. One time it was called Judaism, another time it was called Christianity, another time it was called Islam, it was called Buddhism, it was called Hinduism. Today it's called Baha'i. There's nothing to fight about. There's only one God. What are we fighting about? When in any holy book did God ever tell us to hate each other? He always said, love thy neighbor. I never recall any exceptions on that. And so religion should be uniting. And if religion is dividing us, by the way, it's still the biggest divider in the world. If religion is dividing us, says Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, it's better to have no religion. And so my religion is to break apart all of the divisions that we've had for thousands of years. And my philanthropy is all about that. My philanthropy is anti-sexism, anti-racism, anti-nationalism. anti-religious prejudice. And my philanthropy, and this is also very important, and I say this to my family all the time, I say, help the person you think is the other. Now, of course, in the last letter that I was talking about racism from the House of Justice, it says, let no one be the other. So if you're Jewish, don't just defend Jews, defend Black people, defend Christians, defend Muslims, and vice versa. If you're Black, defend white people. And if you're white, defend Black people. Defend someone who doesn't look like you. Defend someone of another religion, another color. If you're a man, defend women. And if you're a woman, even though we don't deserve it most of the time, maybe defend men. only occasionally, because I'm not sure men deserve defense. But we should always be looking at each other as one human family, and that should be the fabric of everything we do. Now, going back to wealth is neither good nor bad. That's one thing that I always tell people. Wealth is just an accident. I happen to be rich. I wasn't raised rich. I started a business, and when my business became public, I became very wealthy. Wealth doesn't make me better. It doesn't make me worse. A lot of times nowadays, people vilify billionaires. They say, you have $1 billion, you're bad. I actually agree with some of what they're saying, that, we shouldn't have, and of course the writings agree as well, that we shouldn't have people like me who are so wealthy, and while some people are poor. But that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. I've heard that I had to cheat and lie. I didn't do those things. I started a business, it went public. I think I was pretty honest then. I think I was pretty nice, probably imperfect, definitely imperfect. But I don't think I was ever a terrible person. I wasn't trying to cheat and lie and steal. I was always pretty honest. I think that money is just a coincidence. True wealth is spiritual. And the value of a person shouldn't be measured on whether they're rich or poor. And if you read the Baha'i writings carefully, and what I started with, there's nothing wrong with being rich. Baha'u'llah does not say there's anything wrong with being rich. Abdul-Baha, when he was here in 1912, met with Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was far more wealthy than I am. He was one of the wealthiest people. He was like closer to Bill Gates. And Abdul-Baha loved Andrew Carnegie, and he really publicly lauded him for his philanthropy. And you know what? People can do good things whether they're rich or they're poor. It is the responsibility of someone who's rich like me to do good things, and I believe that there's a lot more responsibility. And I also agree with what Baha'u'llah said in the hidden word that I read, that money can be a great barrier between me and God. That's what he said, between a seeker and his desire. Of course, the seeker and his desire would be God. And so in my hometown, I live in Highland Park, Illinois, there are a lot of people who think that buying a nice car or buying a nice house is going to get them to heaven. Buying a stairway, in a 1970s song that I like, the Led Zeppelin, she's buying the stairway to heaven. You can't buy the stairway to heaven. The stairway to heaven is with love. It's built with love of God and all of his creation. True wealth has nothing to do with material. True wealth is what you give. True wealth is in the heart and in the soul. And that is what we should all aspire to. Money is only a tool that can serve. So if you're like me and you're blessed with money, put it to the use of God. And if you're a Baha'i, put it to the use of Baha'u'llah. Ask Baha'u'llah, what do you want me to do? How can I serve? And after all, that's all any one of us can do. And I hope that my children live in a world where there's a little bit less racism and a little bit less sexism and a little bit less nationalism and a little bit less religious prejudice. And that someday more and more people can realize the oneness of humanity. So I was told not to talk too long and to hold my comments down so we can have plenty of time for questions. So let me stop right there and open it up to, I see a few things in chat, and I'm going to see if I can answer some questions. Should I go to the chat?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for that really interesting talk. And it's so interesting to hear your perspective on, material wealth and how it can be used as a tool for social good. Yeah, so now we'd love to have a Q&A portion. If you'd like to ask a question, you can either put it in the chat or use the raise hand button, which you can find by clicking participants and then the buttons in blue. So I see, okay, so we have a question from Roya. How to affect change from within systems that are flawed at their foundation due to being based on injustice, white supremacy, racism, patriarchy, and capitalism? For example, businesses and organizations.
Okay, so I look at it this way. You have to figure out how flawed it is. If it's really that flawed, you have to tear it down and build it back up. I think there's a tendency nowadays to have a cancel culture where this person is all bad. You know, so me being, look, I'm bad in every way. Let me list the ways I'm bad. I'm tall, I'm able-bodied, I'm just getting started. I'm white, I'm rich, I'm straight. Let's see, I know there's a few other things, but basically, you know, I could be canceled for a lot of reasons. You know, so being the evil billionaire. I don't believe in that culture. I believe that we love everybody. And I think it's really reaching out to the other. So sometimes now, I do believe in that white supremacy exists. Although it's interesting, I just want to say something about that. This is told to me by a Black friend recently. He said, you know, you don't have white privilege. And I thought that was interesting coming from a Black man. He says, what you have is lack of privilege. So as a white man, no one gave me anything. I had to work for it, et cetera. But no one stopped me. No one put a barrier. No one put a foot on my neck. He says, what you need to do is take the foot off my neck. Not me personally, but, and that's really, I think, what we need to work to do. So when you talk about white supremacy, yeah, you have to talk about it. I don't necessarily, I think it's education. I think it's educating hearts. I really, really think that you have to, you know, honestly, as a white person, hating me isn't going to help. I don't think, you know, maybe I'm worth it. I don't know. I can't tell you. Again, as I keep saying, I'm not perfect, but I think loving each other, Black and white, is good. And when you talk about white supremacy, there needs to be a lot of education of white people. And there needs to be a lot, part of it is if you go to a white person and say, you're racist, they're going to back away. One of my heroes, and some of you may know him because he's close to the Baha'i community. He's not a Baha'i, but he's very close to the community, is Daryl Davis, if anyone's heard that name. So Daryl Davis is a Black musician who's taken hundreds of people out of the KKK. And I actually got to talk to him. And he doesn't do this by going up to people and saying, you're bad, you're terrible. He goes up to the KKK and, you know, in my mind, you can't get that much worse than the KKK. And he's going up to Grand Wizards and he's saying, hey, I'm here and I'm Black, and but he went and loved them. And if you really read what he said, what he did is he loved them into listening to him. And that's how he affected change. The number one thing we need to do is affect change. And if we have this attitude of conflict, it's not going to affect change. And that's, I highly, highly recommend that July letter from the Universal House of Justice to talk about that. And it says, again, we cannot do this through conflict and contention. So yes, we need to tear down some of the walls, but gently, sometimes firmly, and not with hate, but always with love.
Great, thank you. Our next question, interesting question from Trevor. One of the Baha'i principles is getting rid of extreme wealth and extreme poverty. How can you do that simultaneously?
Well, you have to, but it has to be voluntary. The big thing that, and this is in the Baha'i writings, you cannot take all the money from the rich people. You know, look, if you took all my money, great. You know, that's gonna that could happen. But even if you took all the money, it's still not going to solve the problems. What you need to do is you need to actually clean the hearts of the rich. And so, because what happens is if you legislate any kind of change. So two great examples of that are prohibition and desegregation of schools. Prohibition in the 1920s. Now, I am very public in my stance on this. Drinking alcohol is a terrible thing for society. Huge, huge problems because almost 100,000 people die of alcohol abuse every year in America. It tears apart families. It has huge health problems because of it. Overall, it's a huge net negative. But you can't go to Americans and say stop drinking alcohol because we want to drink alcohol. I mean, not me personally, I never did, and I don't. I stopped drinking when I was 18 and never drank much. But my point is that you can't do it forcefully. We tried to do that in prohibition, it doesn't work. The only way that we'll get rid of alcohol is us embracing this idea that we don't want to drink. And if we did it voluntarily, then society would be much better off. The same thing with desegregation of schools. We desegregated schools, but we didn't desegregate our hearts. And so what happens is schools end up segregating again. You can't legislate change. And the same thing goes with wealth, Trevor. So you cannot legislate and say, I'm going to take your money. I'm going to take your money and I'm going to forcibly take it from you. What you need to do is you need to educate. And that's something I really am passionate about. And I hope to have a chance to do is educate fellow. Of course, I'd like to have as many wealthy Baha'is as possible, but educate people who are wealthy so they can learn to really do, as I'm doing, give away their fortunes in ways that'll help the world, because it's not easy to give away money and do it intelligently. And I'm sure I'm still learning because I'm still new at it, but you can't forcibly do that. Brenda, I wanted to address what you said and a couple other people said in regards to regulation. So can it just be changing the heart? And I want to be clear, it has to be both. So what I was talking about is regulation without love, but then you also can't have love without regulation. So they need to be in there together. We have to have laws desegregating schools, but then you also have to be desegregated in the hearts. It's not one or the other, it's both. And that's typical of the Baha'i faith. You have to have religion and science. Science is your logic and rational part. Religion is your heart, and both of them. God gave us a heart and God gave us a head, a brain and a heart, a soul. And so we need to purify our hearts, but we also need to use our minds. There is a tendency in America among many people to say that religion and science are separate. And as we know in the Baha'i faith, religion and science are in harmony, must be in harmony. And so Brenda, to your point, this legislation that, and I think someone else put, I think it was Galaxy, after you, that there's legislation that Abdul Baha says must be in there. And there's no question that everything has to be codified. But again, laws have to be written after our hearts are purified. It has to everything should be coherent. And that's the one thing I was talking about this week, as we're studying this, is your philanthropy, your life, your work, everything should be coherent. So one thing we do, my wife and I do, again, as wealthy people, is we take all of our investments and we put them through an ethical lens, and we make sure that we're not investing in things that go against our values. So we don't want to make money on one hand and go against what we're giving to in philanthropy. And so Brenda, to your point, yes, legislation matters, but it can't be just pure legislation.
Great. Maybe let's go to the question from Thane and Rose. What were your motivations when you first started your business? Was it survival or was it spiritual or something else?
Definitely not spiritual. So I was raised Jewish. I was Reformed Jew. I believed in God, but to me, so my accountant told me, and this is going to sound like nothing. You're not going to be so impressed. My accountant, I had worked for a couple companies. My previous two employers had both sold out their companies and become multimillionaires. And one had sold his business for a few million. One had sold it for a little over 20 million. And so my accountant said, well, you were the one running sales in both of those businesses. You should probably do it for yourself. So I did, and that was it. So I started my little business. Never expected it would be worth $10 billion someday, but it is now. It's worth what someone wants to pay for it. So stocks go up and stocks go down. But in my opinion, at the time, I think God does things for a reason. I think God knows. There's two wills going on, always your will and God's will. In this case, I'm pretty sure that God's will, and always God's will prevails. And I think this little business that I started for one reason has a much greater use. And so I'm happy that even though I didn't start my business with something great in mind, and I'm very proud of the business itself. We run an excellent business. The CEO who I hired in 2007, Steve Beauchamp, and I'm close friends with, he's amazing. I tell him that all the time, and I tell anyone who wants to listen. He's done a great job. And so I'm happy. We have over 3,000 employees. We have many happy clients. All of that's good. But I'm also happy that I can take the proceeds, my money that I've made from starting this business, and do things that heal the world. And that's really, to me, that's what drives me every day, is what makes me get up. In terms of the movies that Justin and I are making, they're not Baha'i movies. Clouds, the movie that's on Disney right now, is a movie about Zach Sobiak, who was Catholic, but it's Baha'i in spirit. It's talking about, it's inspirational. And so everything we do is to try to raise people's spirits. So I look at Hollywood right now, TV and movies, as a lot of what it is gratuitous sex, gratuitous violence. It's things that lower the soul. The Baha'i writings talk a lot about our animal nature versus our spiritual nature, and how we have to overcome our animal nature and rise up into our spiritual nature. And art reflects society, and society reflects art, and we want to make art that raises spirits. That's the number one thing. If you really want to say what Justin and I are doing together, what he does so well, and I support him in doing, is he makes movies that uplift our spirits. And I'm so happy to be his partner in doing that. So it's really another practical application of the faith.
Great. I see a raised hand from Stephen, so I'll unmute you.
Hi, Steve. You just answered my question. I was going to lay a question on you about what other aspects of the arts are you using your resources to promote unity and promote the Baha'i faith?
Well, since your mic is unmuted, I do have to say aloha, love your picture of Pat. I light up every time I see your face, Steve. You know that. So I wanted to tell you that my favorite thing in my office is that painting of Baha. And so what you do as an artist, by the way, I want to give Steve a plug. I know he didn't ask for one. He wasn't looking for one, but let me just tell you, he's an extremely talented artist. If anyone loves art, especially inspired Baha'i art, look at Steve, look him up. What he does is he takes his talent and he uses it. He's made several beautiful pictures of the faith. Art should be a way to spread the faith. And so whether you're a musician, whether you're a singer, you're an actor like Justin is, a director or an actor, everything you do should be in service. So each of us, and art, the writings say that art is particularly important because it's through the arts that the faith will eventually grow. And the reason for that is that arts touch the heart. You know, really, it's not the brain that leads us, it's the heart that leads us. I talked about alcohol. Again, I could make a case very easily that could convince almost everybody that alcohol is bad for you. I mean, no one could argue with 100,000 lives we're losing a year, plus the health problems and psychological problems and all the other problems having to do with it. No one could argue that. It's a very easy argument to win. And we're still going to have alcohol because people want to drink. You have to get it out of their hearts. And it's the same thing with the arts. What you can do is in one painting, you can inspire people versus 1,000 words. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A motion picture is worth 1,000 words too. So it's really about reaching people on the heart level.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Okay, great. Next question or comment is from Keith, so I'll unmute you now.
Hi, Steve. Do you remember Edinburgh?
I do.
I'm speaking from Derry, Londonderry. By
the way, I said I saw someone from Ireland. I saw you there. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to mention one or two things. Thank you very much for your immense enthusiasm. I don't think I met anyone who's enthusiastic as you are. But just to say that in Ireland, our prejudice that we're trying to help people to get over is Protestant Catholic. In America, it's race and a lot of other prejudices. But in Ireland, I came to Derry 50 years ago and settled in. And people are so ingrained in prejudice over 300 years that they cannot see any difference or any other groups other than Protestant or Catholic. And I was asked so often, are you a Catholic Baha'i or are you a Protestant Baha'i? And whatever I would answer, they would react.
Well, which one are you? I want to know now.
Well, I said I was a Christian Baha'i at the time. But what I wanted to say, when we tried to find a hospice, and as we know, cancer is no respecter of persons, neither is COVID-19. And when we tried to find a hospice, all of that prejudice came into it. And we're divided in Derry by a river. And one day, the gentleman who started this said the only way to satisfy everybody is to build a hospice in the middle of the bridge between the two parts of Derry. It was a joke, of course. And we now have the Foyle Hospice running for 30 years. And everybody of all race, class, creed, colour is welcome to have the services of the Foyle Hospice. But our daily prayers and work in Derry is to help people to understand there is no difference between Catholic or Protestant.
I beg to differ. I had a taxi driver. I had a taxi driver told me. I said, well, you know, since they hate each other so much, how can you tell them apart? He says, oh, that's easy. He said the Catholics' eyes are closer together, and the frauds, they say mater and the Catholics say mater. And I actually asked him, like, how do you tell each other apart? This guy was telling me about how much hate there was. I want to tell you about something real quick in Northern Ireland. Your timing is excellent, because I am working on getting started. It's a center, as we built the center. So, you know, we built the center in Akko, Israel for Jews and Arabs, which is doing great. And we're building another center, we hope, in Belfast. I'm working with the Rooneys, who own a little team called the Steelers in Pittsburgh. It's a football club, not like football you have over there, but football where you try to kill each other. Like that's American football. But anyway, they're Irish, and I've been wanting to build a center in Belfast for years, and we're ready to get going on it now. For Protestants and Catholics, so 50-50, just like we did in Israel.
I'd just like to say one last thing is that, and all Baha'is know this, that Baha'is are trying to help all over the world. There are millions of Baha'is. There is one unique feature, many unique features, but this one is that the system of communication and keeping the unity of the faith is completely unique. It's never happened in the history of the world before. And it is complete. There has been no division, no split, successful split of the Baha'i faith in 186 years. And that never happened before in the previous expressions of the one religion. Mankind wasn't ready for it. But today, all over the world, they're doing stuff like Steve is doing. I'm not a billionaire, but I don't mind that. And so everyone's doing what they want to do and what they can do, and it's linked together with what everyone else is doing. And it's an incredible systems. I have now been a Baha'i 56 years, and I've watched this oak tree grow. And the Derry means a grove of oaks, by the way. And I've seen this oak tree of our faith grow all over the world. And it is astonishing the speed that this little sapling is growing and is now gaining strength to become a great oak. So good luck with the work, Steve, and maybe I'll see you in Belfast.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Keith. Nice to see you. There was a question that was just put out there, and that is, how can I teach the rich? And the thing is, I think, and I'll just say this about teaching, those of you who know me and those of you who kind of witnessed this, is I pretty much teach the Baha'i faith wherever I am. I do limit myself. I only teach when I'm awake, except for those times I dream in prayer, which I do occasionally. But I think it's very important. Now, why is it important to teach the faith? Well, of course, Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah said that, but what are we teaching? Well, we're teaching this idea, going back to what I said before, the oneness of humanity. The healing balm that humanity so desperately needs right now is this idea of oneness. I think that many people of many faiths would like peace. I think everyone would like peace. But when I ask people, most people who aren't Baha'i, can we have world peace? They look at me. They hadn't even really considered that it could be something that that we could have. And so the idea that peace is not only achievable but inevitable is an idea that has to be spread. And the idea that we can help along these lines is an idea that has to be spread. And in terms of teaching the ultra wealthy, Well, I have unique ability to talk to people who are very wealthy, and I do talk to billionaires, and I just mentioned the faith, but I treat it like everyone else. The ultra rich should be taught. One problem that people have is they can't approach. And so one thing about money being a barrier is it keeps you away from other people. I had a guy who met me yesterday, a local Baha'i here in the area I'm in, and his father, who's not a Baha'i, mentioned, he said, "You're just a normal guy." Like, he was surprised. I said, "Well, I am just a normal guy. I put on my pants, one leg at a time. I'm just a normal guy who happens to be rich." A lot of times, I went to a conference a year ago. I remember this. There was a guy who was a billionaire like me, and he had 6 bodyguards. And I was talking to one of the bodyguards. I thought he was a bodyguard for the event. He said, "Oh no, I'm a bodyguard for this individual guy who's here." And I said, "Well, why does he have 6 bodyguards?" He said, "Because he's a billionaire." I said, "Well, I'm a billionaire too." And he looked at me like, wait a second, because he couldn't, like, his mind couldn't compute. Money shouldn't divide you from other people. Money should be a gift to humanity. And so if money is a wall between you and other people, money is also a jail cell. And so for me, it's maybe time to do a jailbreak to those who are wealthy like me, and to let them understand that their material wealth is not the be all and end all. And that's just a matter. I have access, and one of the things the House of Justice told me is I would have access to people that others wouldn't, and to teach them. And so I will. And as a corollary to that is, have I found the ultra rich more or less open? I'd say less. In my hometown, it's not uber wealthy, but it's wealthy. People think that because they have money, they don't need as much spirituality. Everything's okay. I've got my nice house. I've got my nice car. I think money is a barrier. Baha'u'llah says it's a barrier. I, first of all, never disagree with Baha'u'llah. And second of all, I would agree even if I didn't have to work on agreeing on that one. It's just obvious. People think that money is the solution, and we need to get beyond that. We need to understand that true wealth is spiritual. To me, I'm very fortunate to have found the faith as I was becoming very wealthy. I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't found the faith. I think my money would be a burden on me. Some days it's a burden even being a Baha'i. But I can tell you, I'm so grateful that I realized that the money isn't meaningful. That gives me great solace every day. I don't really worry about it. I'm just worried about serving Baha'u'llah. And so the money it becomes a much less of a burden. Some rich people are very spiritual. So again, yes, it's a barrier, but people are people. I think there was another question. And
I see from Wesley, some of the most impactful organizations affecting change in local communities globally often don't have much visibility. They're busy on the ground and don't do much marketing. How do you make sure to identify these organizations? I
don't worry about it. I'm working with the Baha'i International Development Organization, and so they're helping me, and I'm helping them. So I've committed some money to them, and they have feet on the ground all over the world. And to me, that's really important. What I really am working on doing this year, I really started this year for the first time, is I broke off a part of my giving to make it purely Baha'i. And I'm really working on everything I do being in line with the Baha'i writings. In terms of finding worthy organizations, I know there's a million worthy organizations that I don't know anything about, and that's okay. I'm just going to find the ones I'm going to find and work with them. Someone had mentioned teaching indigenous people, and that's one of my things. So I looked for organizations in that way. Racism, we specifically sought out people that are anti-racism. And so the funny thing is, we've been seeking them out anyway, but it worked out very well given the climate this year. So if we just look for organizations that do the things that we're interested in.
Next question is from Alex. I'm unmuting you now. You'll have to also unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. Oh, it's such an inspiring story you've shared, Steve. Thank you so much. I'm reminded, I'm not a wealthy person, but I live in a wealthy country. And so I often think about how my wealth can be used for the betterment of the world. And I have an inherent inherited feeling that wealth gives me a kind of protection. But my question is actually whether you had any thoughts as to how we, as let's say wealthy people, can balance the fact that we feel that we have an impact on the world, that our wealth, that it belongs to us, and we can expend it in God's path, and the danger that that we feel that it's we who have done it. So this paradox, in a sense, because the biggest danger, of course, intention is actually greater, we know, than accomplishment. So like in the Baha'i history, the wealthiest man in Esfahan, or the governor, he wanted to give all his wealth to the Bab, who was the forerunner of the Baha'i faith. And the Bab told him, well, your intention is even better than the fact that you wanted to give it. Actually, he said, that's not how the faith will spread, or that's not how the world will change. So this is always revolving in my mind. And of course, we have examples of Baha'is who have dedicated their wealth to building the Baha'i house of worship in Ashgabat, the first in the world, for instance. And he was also an engineer, so he actually helped made it happen. So that was an enormous blessing. Anyway, thanks.
So I think that we all have a role to play. And our role, I don't think we have, first of all, how do we credit it to God? You turn your face to God. And, one of the things the Baha'i faith teaches you is humility. And, just in the short obligatory prayer every day, we talk about our poverty and God's wealth, and our powerlessness and God's, God's incredible strength and power. Think about this. God is omnipotent, and we're nothing. And so when we turn our hearts to God every day, if every day we sit there and we pray every day, it's very important. That's why we have obligatory prayer. That's why we say our 95 Allahpas. That's why we're to read the writings every day, because they refresh and purify our hearts every day. So it's like, think about if you take your spiritual shower every day, or bath, as it may be. We wouldn't not take a physical shower or bath. Well, some of us might, but most of us would take a shower or a bath every day to clean ourselves physically. And so we need to clean ourselves spiritually. And if we renew and refresh ourselves, and if we turn our faces towards God, and if we swim in the ocean, I always say this, I love those words when Baha'u'llah says this, swim in the ocean of his words. If we literally swim, I say the hidden words every day. If we swim in the ocean of his words every day, it washes you. And the world makes you dirty. We live, one of the things that Shoghi Effendi said is that we're going to be in the eye of the storm, and we need to be in the eye of the storm. We got the storm swirling around us. Look at the news and all the political things going around, people saying, I hate you for this and I hate you for that. We need to be centered and calm in that center of that storm. And so if we are, then we can understand that it's not about us, it's about God.
Our next question is from Chowji, so I'm going to unmute you now.
Oh, hello. Hi. Thank you for this wonderful talk. I have a question. It's specific about art. You mentioned the importance of the art impact people's spirituality. I am a visual artist. I learned Baha'i faith in China back in '93, and I've lived in US since '99. In my own observation, I found Baha'i communities are not very supportive of a Baha'i artist. They are not very passionate about I found more warmth in my Asian American communities. It's not just me. I've talked to many Baha'i artists. Tierney Sutton mentioned the same problem years ago at the Grand Canyon Baha'i Conference. Do you have any suggestions how Baha'i community can better support Baha'i artists?
Well, teach rich people about the Baha'i faith. So the Baha'i community is still relatively new, relatively young, relatively poor. Part of it, and you may understand this. Do you have children?
I do.
How old are they?
17 and 21.
Just like
Buddy and Ella.
I have two 17-year-olds. And so my 17-year-olds, the problem is they refuse to support themselves. I say, go get a job. And they say, no, we're going to school, Dad. We're supposed to do that. Of course, actually, we did both have jobs. When a kid is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they don't have a job. You're supporting them. And it's kind of, it can be very expensive. And then they go to college and it's even worse. And you're putting out money, 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 money. For what? And then eventually, knock on wood, they become adults and they become self-supporting, some of them, and they move on. And then eventually they might actually support children of their own. And at that point, they're giving money back. A business is the same way. When I started my business, and I've started several businesses, you put money into it, money into it, money into it. And eventually, if you're lucky, that business becomes profitable. And then money, as it becomes more mature, money comes out of it. Art. The reason why there's not a lot of people buying art in the Baha'i community is where the Baha'i community is. We're a relatively new and young community. So we're like that young business or that young child. We're just not there yet. As the community matures, we'll have more money for the arts. We'll have more money for things that we don't right now. So the community is young and scrappy right now. I think over the next 20, 30, 40 years, that will change as the Baha'i community grows and becomes more mature. But I really think it's a factor of the age or lack thereof of the Baha'i community. I don't think it's spirit. There's a tremendous spirit in the Baha'i community. People love the Baha'i faith. I just don't think there's a lot of money, and we're all stretched thin because we're doing 10 different things. I have a fireside, I have devotional, I have Rui, I have feast, and I have to do my job. And so Baha'is are like, and you want me to buy your art on top of that? It's not. As the community matures and grows and we get to a different level, it'll change. And my thought is I'd love to see it happen sooner than later. And ni hao ma.
谢谢. No, I wasn't talking about buying, the works I do, inspired by Baha'i faith. It's a teaching project for me. I have people, 1,000 people come to see, but I send out invitation to my Baha'i community. A very small number of people come. I understand what you said, that people are busy occupying with many different tasks. I was hoping when it's displayed in the public space, we could use that as a tool for teaching, sharing with their friends, but it's not as I expected.
Well, I think it will, tell you a little story about this Baha'i lecturer who came to give a speech at a high school. And I only heard the second hand, but he came to give the speech and nobody came, only the janitor. So he took this whole speech and he gave it to the janitor, and the janitor listened. And many years later, he saw that same janitor again, and he was on either the NSA or the House of Justice. So you never know. You don't have to have 1,000 people to see your art, but the right person to see your art.
I think the next question is from Geeti, so I'll unmute you. You'll have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Steve, I am so glad you talk about teaching the people of capacity. I think there is a culture in some of our Baha'i communities that you feel guilty. You feel guilty if you are rich. And also, I think we are not teaching enough people of capacity. I just want to tell you quickly, my father met Abdul Baha when he was very young, and he begged him to stay in the Holy Land. He said, no, you go back to Iran, learn English, and teach the people of capacity. I remember Bill Gates, his wife, Melinda, when her children were very young, she said, we are looking for something to teach our children. And I truly tried to find a way to send her an email or something about the Baha'i Faith. Unfortunately, I was not very successful. But I think it's very important for our community to know that we need people of capacity. We need people like Steve, people like all these other people who are influencing other people.
And I think with people like Melinda Gates, I think everyone wants to teach her their religion. Think about it. Probably for maybe somewhat different reasons, but well, look, we have billions of dollars we could get. I think we should just teach everyone, rich or poor, as if they're just somebody else. I did see Melinda Gates speak recently last year, and she's a Catholic, despite the fact that she's got literally almost into a war with the Catholic Church. So I think if someone could sit down and talk to her, first of all, I think they have a nice spirit, the Gateses do. And I think that there's probably an opening there at some point, but I've not met her. Actually, it's interesting. I could have met her, but I didn't at that point, and I probably should have. So that's my bad. That's my bad. I'm thinking about I should have made an extra effort. I think I was busy that day. So next time I'm going to make an effort to meet her. What's my view on empowering people through teaching them the science and skills of agriculture? Absolutely. I know that's in Baha'i writings. I think I'm not an expert on agriculture, but I know that we have to do that. And I think it's important that what we eat is very important. So I know that in the future, agriculture will be very important. But it's not my areas of expertise.
I got one question, I think, from Edward, so I'll unmute you.
Yes, sir. Allah.
Allah.
I would like to ask you a question. How the Baha'is in America, I'm a Baha'i in America, how could we help the people of color gain equity, which is so needed in that community? If you have any guidance on that, could you please let us know?
Yeah, so first of all, it has to be, familiarity, white and black together in their houses, inviting people, has to be deep friendships, intermarriage. It has to be hiring. Are your hiring practices? Are you frequenting black-owned businesses? Are you making an effort as a white person to take your privilege, every which shape, and from the nth degree to the point of sacrifice, on lifting up people of color and letting them know that this is important to you every day, and being steadfast in this effort and doing it with love? That's a few things. Are you educating your family and your friends that this is a problem? And are you being brave in saying this? That no, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to be an activist in this particular area. Not, and I talked about this earlier, not to the point of hating people, but just telling people this is a problem and this is a problem I care about. And then I'll just say it, Black Lives Matter. Just, being very, very public and saying that. And I'm not saying that, by the way, some people find that to be a political statement. I'm not saying that as a political statement. I'm literally just saying it, those 3 words.
Great, thank you. I think in the interest of time, we'll close off the questions there. I just wanted to say a big thank you again to Steve for that great talk. And thank you to everyone for the follow-up discussion too. So our speaker next week is going to be Mr. Hooper Dunbar, and the topic of his talk will be, how can the Baha'i Faith change your life? And again, these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern time. So please invite all your friends and family. And if you would like to be on the mailing list and you are not, I'll put the contact form again in the chat in a second. We will now close with a prayer revealed by Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, set to music.
expression of love to mankind. Oh, thou who art our life and light, verily in thee we will find comfort and strength. Verily in thee we will find comfort and strength.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next Saturday. Bye.